Hey, MCE crew. Back in the day, beating inflation was simple when it was running at 2.2% per annum. But today, of course, you know the story is a lot different because inflation, real inflation, is up in the neighborhood of 16%. I don't care what, Fox News or Clown News Network or Mess NBC or any of those propaganda organizations tell you. When you discount food and energy, the two most frequent interactions you have with the economy, from the number you're reporting, then you're doing an injustice to the people. And of course, we tell the truth here at Money Changes Everything. So now look, at some point, inflation is going to slow down. And we're going to get back into a normal range at some point. I hope. When is that going to happen? I don't know. But if you situate yourself such that you are getting returns that wildly beat the average of inflation over maybe a 10-year period or 15-year period, what's wrong with that? Okay. So what we've got to do is take a look at some assets that are going to do that in a high inflationary environment. Now, you've got to do your own due diligence. And as we go through some of these, you got to figure out whether or not any of them are right for you. I certainly can't tell you because I don't know you. Although I am happy that you're a part of this community. Let me take a moment here. I'm recording this on Mother's Day. My brothers and my nephews and, my family are here at my house. And we did a little cookout after we came back from the cemetery. Because I think I shared with you all that my mother recently passed away a few months ago. She was 70. And we went to the cemetery, which is actually not far from my home. And we, were there at the cemetery. And then we came here. So I want to say happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I would encourage all of you to make every day Mother's Day. Because once she's gone, there's no one on earth that will ever replace her. I used to call my mother every single day. And we talk about politics. We, laugh and talk about, she loved the Food Network. She loved to cook. But anyway, she's not here with us anymore. But I'm so grateful with regard to how she raised us because, she prepared us. And not only did she prepare us for the world, but she was such a compassionate woman that, she inspired us with that as well. So celebrate mom, and to all the moms out there, happy belated Mother's Day. Even though this is Mother's Day when I'm taping this, you'll see it sometime thereafter. So look, let's get into this. We're going to talk about non-asset classes for protection against inflation. But let's take a look at some of the news that's out there first, because I'm going to lay the groundwork for why, again, you need to be doing things or considering doing things a little differently, changing your definition of wealth. First up, Ukraine grain strain. Say that 5 times fast. Almost 25 million tons blocked from export. A massive backlog of grain shipments is piling up in Ukraine to the tune of nearly 25 million tons due to infrastructure challenges. Of course, they're in a war zone, and I'm sure a lot of the infrastructure they use for their exports, to get them out of the country, that transportation infrastructure has been damaged. Anyway, ports to the Black Sea are blocked, including Mariupol, which, if you're following that whole Ukraine-Russia thing, Mariupol is one of the hot spots where they've been doing a lot of fighting. And this is coming from a UN Food Agency official. Ukraine was the 4th largest exporter of maize, also known as corn, in 2020 and 2021 in that season. And the 6th largest wheat exporter in the world, according to the International Grains Council. And look, as I've always told you, you guys know it. I'll sound like a broken record for anyone who's new here. Corn is not a vegetable. It's a grain. It is the base of the food chain. Chickens, cows, pigs, pheasants, what was I going to say? goats, all those animals that we feed on, they eat and graze on corn. So when the price to feed them goes up, of course, the price to feed us goes up. It's an almost grotesque situation we see at the moment in Ukraine, with nearly 25 million tons of grain that could be exported, but they cannot leave the country simply because of lack of infrastructure, the blockade of the ports, said Deputy Director of FAO Joseph Schimmenhuber during a Geneva press briefing via Zoom. According to Schimmenhuber, the full silos could result in storage shortages for this year's July and August harvest. So what he's saying there is their silos right now are filled. So if they need to, because it's not moving, if they need to put more in from some harvest somewhere, then that's not going to be possible because the silos, storage silos, are already filled to capacity. And you've got to believe that there probably, although there will be more maybe coming in, it won't be a lot more, simply because I will be damned if I'll be a Ukrainian grain farmer out there in the middle of a field in my John Deere tractor as Tupolev bombers come overhead of this big empty cornfield that I'm in. No thanks. So that's another pressure. He alluded to destroyed grain storage as a result of Russia's invasion without elaborating. So basically, in the fighting over there, Russia has apparently destroyed some of the storage silos. CNN, however, reports, now, we got to be careful here. CNN reports. However, multiple sources say that Russian forces have allegedly plundered farm equipment and hundreds of thousands of tons of grains from Ukraine, with the Ministry of Defense estimating on Thursday that 400,000 tons of grain have been stolen to date. Now, if that is correct, and I have seen that reported elsewhere, so we've got it from two different sources, and the other source did not cite CNN as their source, so I tend to believe this. The equipment, the farm equipment, if you've taken their ability to harvest the grain, then of course you can't harvest the grain. Let's see. Oleg Ninivensky at the Kiev School of Economics told CNN that thefts of farm equipment, such as tractors and harvesters by Russian forces, have been absolutely devastating for Ukrainian farmers. I bet. Okay, there's no way you have a farm set up to do that kind of work, and then you find yourself in a situation where you don't have the equipment necessary. What can you fall back on? Okay, this isn't 1776. You're not going out there with and doing it by hand. Even if these regions are liberated tomorrow, it will take time to restart the production cycle. Perhaps 2 or 3 years. Now, look, we're seeing that. These governors in America, including the governor here in Maryland, decided to shut down the state's economies to a large degree. A lot of the governors. Some didn't. But a lot of the governors shut down the economies of their states. And now we are seeing how basically you slammed on the brakes to the American economy. And now we're seeing how difficult it is to get it all started back up and working in harmony the way it was. And this is on a global scale. So even though we feel it here, a lot has to do with what's going on around the globe. Because remember, a lot of countries shut things down. So we're seeing that production cycle getting back to where we were. It's tough because of the shutdowns and now because of this war in Ukraine. Footage has been posted online of long Russian convoys of farm equipment and flatbed trucks leaving these Eastern European words are very difficult for me. I have a friend, Yana, who is actually from Siberia, and she could do well with this. I'll have her on one day if we have another Russian story. But anyway, a city in southeastern Ukraine, they're seeing these convoys leave through there. The former agriculture minister in Ukraine said farm equipment thefts were also seen in Donetsk, and Kharkiv. The equipment was simply stolen and pulled across the border. New tractors, harvesters, all of it. Prior to the invasion, there were 8 million tons of wheat and 15 million tons of corn ready for export. This is, again, a global market. Grain is a global market. So to the extent we've taken the Ukrainian grain offline because of these infrastructure problems, to the extent that Russian grain cannot be marketed due to sanctions, then same demand, smaller supply. You guys are an intelligent audience. You know exactly what that means. So let me wrap this part of it up. The latest Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations report estimated a 20% decline in global wheat production this year due to the ongoing situation in Ukraine, where the Ministry of Agriculture recently warned a third of the country's farmland is occupied or unsafe. Okay, so 20% is a lot of anything, okay? My wife, when we were putting this cookout together, I was fixing the food on the barbecue, and she ran up to one of the supermarkets in order to get some little ancillary stuff. When she came back, she told me, she said, hey, you know what? The bread aisle, they've shortened the bread aisle. They rearranged it, and they've shortened it. It's like half an aisle now. So it could be due to the grain shortage that we are seeing, folks. So go out there, buy that flour, buy some canned corn if you like it now, because it's going to be in short supply. And if you find it, it's going to be more expensive. Real quick, let's touch on Western banks brace for a $10 billion hit over exit from Russia. So these banks, many of them, especially the Western European banks, have exited Russia, and it's going to cost. It's going to cost them. It's going to cost their share owners. This week, a string of European banks set aside billions of euros in provisions ahead of the closure of their Russian operations, following similar moves by U.S. lenders last month. Western banks collectively have $86 billion worth of exposure to Russia, with close to 40,000 staff. A lot of people are going to get laid off, and are setting aside more than $10 billion in expectation of losses on their ventures, according to the Financial Times. French lender Société Générale, which has operated in Russia for 150 years, has set aside 561 million euros for the first quarter. So they were in Russia when it was a communist country and even before that. All right, that's how long they've been there, and they've gotten out of there here recently because of the invasion of Ukraine. They expect losses of $3.3 billion on sales of its Rosbank subsidiary, which was founded by billionaire Vladimir Putin. The bank has 3.1 million retail customers throughout Russia and $19.3 billion of total exposure to the country. Around 12,000 people are employed by Rosbank. So this is kind of what we saw with Netflix. Now, Netflix made a dumbass decision, and they said, we're just going to pull the subscriptions from all of the Russians that have Netflix, as if that was going to make a difference, as if somebody in the Kremlin was going to go running into Vladimir Putin's office and say, hey, boss, they said they're going to cancel Netflix. So do you really want to rethink this invasion thing? And like Putin, yeah, man, you know, you might be right. So when they did that, I forget how many subscribers it was, but I did calculate the monthly subscriptions. It was like over $10 billion that they just voluntarily lost. Now, these banks are in a different position. They are in a situation where they, because of the government sanctions, they really have no choice. So if you are invested in banks, take a look and see to what extent you have exposure to Russia. I know that I'm a JP Morgan investor, and they've got exposure. I'm going to hang in there with them, though. Let's go to the asset classes for protection against inflation. You guys have been waiting for that. All right, look, first up, Gold. Gold has often been considered a hedge against inflation. We talk about that all the time. This is a pretty much a 5,000-year-old commodity that has been seen as valuable. Um, Pretty much, I would say 2,500 or half of that time, it's been considered somewhat like a financial instrument. All right. Of course, the Egyptians prized it, but didn't use it financially as much as we have seen in like later eras like the Roman Empire. Many people have looked to gold as an alternative currency, particularly in countries where the native currency is losing value. Sounds familiar. These countries tend to utilize gold or other strong currencies when their own currency has failed. Gold is a real physical asset. And in this day and age, real physical assets are very attractive to me, especially when I've seen Canada threaten to snatch people's bank accounts, when we've seen Go Fraud Me, the charity company, do the same thing. And when we've seen America push harder and harder for CBDC, and what do you think they're going to do with that? We've heard from Saul Amonrova, who says that basically we can freeze your money anytime we want. That CBDC is going to be part and parcel of how they implement a social credit score here in America. They're saying gold is not a true perfect hedge against inflation. When inflation rises, central banks tend to increase interest rates, which we're seeing here in America now and in other parts of the world. Holding on to an asset like gold that pays no yields, because gold does not provide an income, is not as valuable as holding on to an asset that does, such as maybe a stock that pays a dividend. Commodities. Gold is a commodity, but they're talking about investing in electrical infrastructure, oil, beef, orange juice, frozen concentrated orange juice.
Here in New York, they trade everything. Gold, silver, platinum, heating oil, propane, cocoa and sugar, and of course, frozen concentrated orange juice.
And natural gas, as well as foreign currencies, emissions, and certain other financial instruments. These are considered the commodities that they're talking about other than gold. Commodities and inflation have a unique relationship, where commodities are an indicator of inflation to come. As the price of commodities rise, so do the price of products that the commodity is used to produce. We're seeing that now also. A 60-40 stock bond portfolio, I don't like that one. You have to decide if that's right for you. I don't like it because although interest rates are rising, right now I think you can do better. But again, this is what Investopedia is suggesting, okay? Real estate investment trusts, those REITs, you might not want to go out there and buy yourself a 18-unit apartment building right now. Might not be situated to do it. But a REIT is basically a company that owns and operates income-producing real estate. You invest in it, and when the tenants pay their rent, you get a little cut of that, okay, in the form of a dividend. Property prices and rental income tend to rise when inflation rises, and we have definitely seen that. We own a financial services company and a real estate company, and real estate prices in the Mid-Atlantic are definitely up. REITs consist of pools of real estate that pay out dividends to investors. Now, there are all kinds of REITs. There are retail REITs that are a bundle of shopping centers. There are data center REITs. So let's say Amazon has a big old data center that they own and operate, but there could be data hotels where several companies have equipment in, and where people can rent server space in. Those are REITs. There are hospital REITs. The S&P 500, that's where we're going to stop, because the S&P 500 has beaten the hell out of inflation in the last 2 years. 2020 was 16.3% return on the S&P, and 2021 was over 25%. Both of those beat inflation. Let's keep going, guys. I lied. We're not going to stop. We just got a few more. Real estate income. Of course, if you own rental real estate, you can raise the rents. People expect that. I know when I was renting, the rent went up every single year. If it was residential, I know commercial is a little different. If you own the real estate, then it is likely, depending on a lot of factors, that real estate will appreciate. And whether or not it will appreciate faster than what inflation is today is debatable. but typically it, hung tight with inflation depending on the area you were in and the style of the real estate. I'm not going to read that one. It's kind of self-aggrandizing. The Bloomberg Aggregate Bond Index, sponsored by Bloomberg. You can look into it if you have an interest. Leveraged loans. Let me talk about this one for a quick second. I'm going to tell you how to kind of look at something that could give you the ability to do this. A leveraged loan is a loan that is made to companies that already have high levels of debt or low credit score. So like a junk bond almost. These loans have higher risk of default and therefore are more expensive to the borrower. So that interest rate is going to be higher for whoever's borrowing with bad credit and a high level of debt already existing. Leveraged loans as an asset class are typically referred to as collateralized loan obligations. These are multiple loans that have been pooled into one security. Now look, there is a mechanism that will allow you to loan money if you choose to do that. I am not telling you to do that. You got to do your own due diligence. But with an insurance policy that builds cash value, if you fund it correctly, then you could use those proceeds to loan out and get interest on that money. So now you have to figure out whether or not that's for you. You have to do your own due diligence. You have to understand the product that you're putting that money into to allow you to do that. We'd be happy to talk to you about that if you like, because insurance is one way to do it. And insurance is one of the products that we market. So guys, that's it for now. I appreciate your time. But I wanted to go over some of that info and have you have something actionable. So go over these asset classes, figure out if there's any there for you. And guys, I'll talk to you soon.